Well, thank you so much for coming. Hello, I'm Meg Cabot.
And I'm Danielle Paige.
And we are both guilty of having written under the influence.
Yes.
Which, okay, well, also that. But actually it means that we've both written books that are based on other books.
Yes.
Or myths, classic stories. You have written books based on, or actually not based on, they are sequels to
The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, which you can find out there for sale. Just a little plug to let you know. We will be signing at 5, I think, yeah.
Yes.
And I have written books based on the Arthurian myth. The myth of Persephone. Those books were actually based here in Key West, in case you don't know. The underworld is under the Key West Cemetery. And I wrote about Dracula, who I have a whole thing that I don't think vampires are really romantic, great guys, but that's a different thing. But what we really wanted to talk about today, I think, is what got us both into writing about
Yes.
kind of empowered females. And I was kind of wondering what kind of books you read as a kid.
I was big on Dickens and Jane Austen, and I loved Jane Eyre. I loved all the classics. And then also I was reading Judy Blume,
Oh my
obviously.
God. So yeah, Judy Blume, I think a huge influence on both of us. Also one of the people who started this literary festival, so
Yes. And
honor to Judy.
I love her.
The
I
queen.
just got to meet her.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good.
Yes. What about you?
No, same. I definitely Judy Blume. Nancy Drew was really huge.
Oh, I love Nancy Drew.
I really wanted a roadster so that I could go around and solve crimes with my attractive dad. Jane Eyre also I was weirdly into Jane Eyre, which now, if you read Jane Eyre now, you're like, the dude had a crazy lady locked up in his attic.
Yes.
That was not.
It's not very romantic.
Oh, sorry,
either.
spoiler for anyone who hasn't read it. But Jane Eyre, for her time, was really progressive. She was very empowered. And Jane Austen, too. I loved Lizzie and all the girls. And,
Me too.
yeah. But I also, I have to admit, got really into reading romance novels, which I know in some circles are looked down upon. I just want to mention that they're a billion-dollar industry. They're the most sold books of any books in the world, except for the Bible.
I did not know that. But I was also sneaking into my mother's room and getting her copy of The Thornbirds and Anne Rice. I loved Interview with the Vampire and all of those books.
And all of those books have very strong female characters.
Yes.
Who kind of lead the way, trying to find out who they are in the world, and along the way they're also having romances.
Right. I loved, did you read, was it Jill or Julie Devereaux? The one with the castle?
You mean Jude Devereaux?
Jude? Is it
One of
Jude?
the goddesses
Yes.
of romance, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes,
I got it
did.
wrong, but I totally read it.
No, you did. You got it. As soon as you said castle, I was like,
Yes.
oh yeah, Queen Jude, totally.
That was
yeah.
my favorite one.
And I think one of the problems that I found as a kid growing up was that there were very few books with empowered females, because a lot of the books, at least at my library, the girls were kind of victims a lot of the times.
Yes.
And there were kind of books that, to warn girls, don't do this, like, don't go with that guy. Perhaps he's a vampire and you'll die. And that I didn't like that, and I didn't want that. I wanted books where girls had agency. And that was also kind of around the same time that Star Wars, the first movie,
Yes.
came out, and there was Princess Leia, who was out there. She had her laser blaster, and she was ruling a planet. She was also a senator, so she was ruling a planet, and a princess too. So, and that's what I wanted to read about, more books like that, and it was very hard to find.
Yeah, the young adult section was probably about from here to here.
Yeah, I mean, and now we both write YA. Now the YA section has exploded. You can find, and YA, I just want to point out, is not a genre. It's a category, age category of children's fiction. So within that category, you can find tons of different genres. You can find mysteries, you can find romance, you can find sci-fi, you can find, what is Dorothy Must Die categorized as?
I think it's called just fantasy. I think
Fantasy, yeah.
yeah.
So there's any kind of book that you could ever want to read. And I feel like we are, Judy is very responsible for that.
Yes.
But kind of the girls have helped. There's some YA written by men, but very little. And ours is better.
Right,
No.
But Meg, you also, I think, opened a door for...
So I wrote The Princess Diaries, which was one of the first books that kind of came out right around the time Harry Potter was coming out. And it got rejected like 29 times. And the reason it got rejected, all the editors kept saying is, the girl in the story finds out she's a princess, and she's not happy, which is kind of the anti-Cinderella archetype, because Cinderella is, of course, taken away from her horrible life, and she's happy about that. My character has a pretty good life. She wants to be just normal, and she does not want to have to go live in a palace and rule it, and she doesn't need to be rescued because she's fine on her own. But and so what the publishers kept saying is, well, what are girls going to learn from this? Like, they didn't get it. Well, this girl doesn't need to be rescued. She's not a victim. That was really what they thought that YA needed to be at that time.
Wow. And that is the complete opposite now.
Yeah. So they finally figured it out. And they realized that girls and boys want to read for entertainment. They don't need to only read to be educated, although we all like to be educated when we reread. But adults, I know that all of you and all of you who are here who are teenagers like to read for fun. I mean, a lot of us do want to read just because we want to relax and read a good story. And it took a long time for us to convince publishers that that's true of everybody.
Yes.
Kids, adults, all ages.
And I think I was drawn to fairy tales because those were the only stories where you had a female protagonist and a female antagonist, and there was a strong female character. And I was always drawn to the wicked girls because they had power and agency, and the other girl the princess was the victim. But at least the foe was another girl.
And that kind of leads us to comic books a little bit, because you have the bad guy and the good guy, and sometimes the bad guys and good guys were girls.
Yes.
Because you saw a lot in comic books if you read those. Because I have to admit, I read Star Wars comic books because I loved Princess Leia so much. And she would sometimes battle evil people in the Empire who were girls.
I remember just having the Star Wars Golden book and then having the one with the record player that you could read along with. That was my first Star Wars.
We're so old.
I love that book.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I have another question for you.
Yes.
How did you get started writing?
So I wanted to be a journalist. I grew up in Atlanta, and I was sure of it from the time I was like 6 years old. My very first story I wrote was actually a fairy tale. It was a princess and a unicorn, and I remember writing it. You know those wallpaper versions? Did you guys do that, where you make your own book? You probably just do it digitally now, but in first grade, every first grader got to make a book, and they bound it.
Oh,
and
cool.
And so I took it home, and I told my mom I want to be a writer. And she's like, well, then you should be a journalist. And so,
It's the same.
That was the way to be a writer. It would be a guaranteed career. At the time, journalism was very secure. So I think I was maybe 10 years old. I found a book about how to get into journalism school, and I picked out the top 10 journalism schools, and I decided that's my goal. And so I was editor of my junior high paper, my high school paper. I went to Columbia because that's the top journalism school, and I was going to go to grad school. And then my senior year, I'd also been working on the newspaper and the radio station, and I was the editor of the fashion magazine. I'd go to fashion shows. And I took a fiction writing class, and at the same time, I took an internship at a TV show. And I fell in love with script writing and the idea of writing fictional stories, and I changed my entire course. And then I had to tell my parents, I'm not going to journalism school, I'm going to go work on Guiding Light, the soap opera.
They must have been thrilled.
They were so thrilled. They were so thrilled. And I'm going to be a production assistant. I'm going to make no money. And you guys paid for this great expensive college for me. It's like, thanks, Mom. Can I have rent for a year? And they did. They gave me, instead of a present for graduating, I got rent for a year. And in that year, I moved up from being a production assistant to being a writer's assistant. And 3 years later, I wrote my first script. And I became a scriptwriter on Guiding Light for 5 years. And then the show started getting canceled, and I had to figure out what to do with my life. And I wrote a pilot for MTV, which never got made, but it was cool because Al Roker worked on it, and I met Al Roker. And then I started writing YA because I always liked writing for young adult characters, and I wanted to stay in New York, and here I am.
Good. All right. I love it.
Yeah. What about you?
Wow. It's hard to follow that. I just wanted to be a writer. I loved writing, and told my parents I was going to be a writer, and they said, well, you better learn some other skills because that's not going to work out. Start getting waitressing jobs. Actually, my mom made me take typing in high school as an elective because she said, you're going to be somebody's secretary. That's going to be your life. And I did, and it really turned out to be true because when I graduated from college, I became someone's secretary because it was the only job I could get. But that's not to say if you want to be a writer that you shouldn't take creative writing classes, because I did take creative writing classes and my teachers were very encouraging. But the thing I wanted to write was romance novels, because those were the books that I loved reading. And the reason I loved reading them was because I had kind of like a difficult, very dysfunctional family. And when I wanted to escape from what was going on with my dysfunction, I mean, seriously, like arrests and stuff, not me. I would go and just grab a romance novel and disappear into that family's problems, which were always much better because they took place in castles or like out on the Western Plains, and there was no cops coming to the door usually. So I loved it, and I was like, I can do this. I saw that movie Romancing the Stone. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
So good.
I wanted to be Joan Wilder. Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna be her. And so when I was working the secretarial job, which was actually at an NYU dorm, I was the assistant manager of an NYU dorm. So really the kids didn't wake up until like noon, so I could just work on the book. and it finally worked. Like I got published. And I had to tell you my pen name that I wrote romance novels under, because
I'm gonna find it.
yeah, I don't want people reading those. But well, I mean you can, but it's a little embarrassing. My husband's always like, he thinks that people will come up to him when they find out and they're like, hey, I guess she did all her research on you, buddy. And so, but during that time, my mom also started she started dating one of my teachers because my dad had finally passed away. If there's anybody here who is still in school, just think about that. Your mom dating one of your teachers. And that was so gross to me that I started writing a book about a girl whose mom was dating one of her teachers, and that turned into The Princess Diaries. And then it got rejected 29 times, but finally it got picked up, and that
Seems like it worked out.
It did work out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Except for me, because I still had to see my mom with her teacher. And everybody thinks that story's about a girl who's like a princess, but it's not.
My first episode of Guiding Light had a very old couple in a hot tub. And this was the episode that I'd written. I was so proud of, and I had to invite all my friends over, and they had to watch the love happen, and also my mom had to watch it. So
yeah,
but yeah.
Yeah. I'm so stunned by the image. I forgot the question I was going to ask you. Hold on. Pause for a moment. We are going to take questions from the audience too, so you guys start thinking of some when I get the signal that it's time.
I distracted you with the hot tub story.
Okay, here's one. This is a hard one. We're gonna raise up the bar.
Okay,
Why do you think it's important to depict girls in strong, empowering roles in fiction, especially today?
Because we are strong, for one thing.
They reflect us, right?
Yes.
They reflect the things that we've gone through, and
also
it's reality.
I think that young adult literature and graphic novels are places where you see women in power and with agency, and I think that some of the other media, like television and film, are just catching up to that. Like the YA section is huge, but how many movies every summer have a female protagonist? Romantic comedies are disappearing, and they're just trying to have a resurrection on Netflix. But when I was growing up, there was a Julia Roberts movie every week, and then they kind of disappeared. Like there aren't a lot. So for me, like I think that one of the reasons is like getting to see girls in power is on the page, and you get used to it, and then you want that power in your life.
Yeah, and I think every single time they have a movie such as like Ocean's 8. Was that the latest one?
Yes.
Or the Pitch Perfect. Every time one of those movies comes out and they make a ton of money, you always see an article from someone in Hollywood who's like, it's so strange that a movie with a lot of women made money. When Princess Diaries came out and it made a ton of money, and they were like, this is such a surprise. What happened? Well, how can women go to the movies? I've never seen them drive. It's like, what?
Yes.
What are you even talking about? So,
and also there's so much pressure on on the prince. Whenever your movie came out, there must have been a lot of pressure. Like if this doesn't do well, then maybe we won't do another woman movie for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when Wonder Woman came out 2 years ago, there was all this like the lead up. It's like, well, if this does badly, I don't know if we'll have another female superhero, and it's like, and that's ridiculous.
Well, and that leads me to my next question, which is both Danielle and I. This is kind of how we met. Were asked by DC Comics to be part of a new program that they're doing, which is to write graphic novels for younger female readers, but we're going to let boys read them too, because Wonder Woman was such a success, trying to get more girls into comics, because if you've ever looked at comics, a lot of them are very much geared towards male readers. So we both picked female superheroes, and we're writing about them. Well, I'm writing about mine at a much younger age. She's Black Canary. Some of you may be familiar with Black Canary. She's a little bit obscure. She is a superhero whose only superpower is that she's very, very loud. And she can scream. She has a sonic scream, and it will devastate whole armies when she lets it go. And I picked her because when I was a kid, I was very loud, and the principal of my middle school, I'll never forget, came to me in the cafeteria and said, Meg, you are the loudest person in this entire cafeteria. You need to keep quiet. And I feel, to me, that's something that is said to women a lot. You're too loud. It's not flattering to be a loud woman. You know, women are supposed to be quiet, and I love that this character is so loud that she can kill people with just her voice. So when they said, "Who do you want to be?" I was like, "I'm going to be the loud girl." So I'm doing that one, and you are doing.
I'm doing Mira, who everyone says it's Aquaman's girlfriend, but I call her. I flip it and say that Aquaman is. Wait, how did I do it?
Aquaman is her boyfriend.
Yeah, that. I did it yesterday perfectly. And so my story is originally, actually, I did pitch for Aquaman. And I ended up
well, you
doing
just
her
like
instead.
people who can swim underwater and talk to fish.
I have a thing for that, yeah.
And you're not even an Aquarius, I don't think. But
No,
okay.
I'm a Libra.
Yeah, well, balance.
Yeah.
I get it, yeah.
So originally, I actually pitched Aquaman as Little Mermaid. I don't know. I think I told you this. And so I straight up, I wrote, my actual pitch was like Aquaman, a whole new world. Like I wrote it down and I sent it in.
Aquaman, a whole new world.
And my story was about Aquaman like growing up under the sea, and then he gets to land and he sees a girl and he falls in love and he follows her there, and that was the original story that I pitched.
Which is not the Aquaman story at all.
No. And since I was not as familiar with comics as anyone here probably who's now seen the Aquaman movie, that did not exist yet. So I was told, like, this is great, Danielle, but Aquaman grew up on land. That's the one thing that you cannot change. So, okay. And then they told me about Mira, and that she grew up in another colony from Atlantis, which is his home colony, and that the two colonies are warring. Yeah. So she decides to kill him. Just for her country, and she comes to land, and she does meet him and try to kill him, but instead they fall in love. You know, that's
it's a typical teen romance. Yeah. It's very common. We see it every night on the news. So it's a cute meet cute.
It's a love story.
They left that part out of the movie, but your story goes deeper.
Yeah.
So when's that coming out?
In April 2nd.
All right. So we have that to look forward to. We're having one more question, and then we're going to go to the audience.
It goes so fast.
Well, you know. What made you think that you could write it's very different than writing a novel. What made you think you could do it?
Well, for me, the script writing background made
right.
So it felt like kind of returning to my roots, in that you write the dialogue, and then someone else creates the images, and not actors, but like there's a great artist that's your partner. The only thing that was really scary was like figuring out this new format where you have to figure out how many panels go on a page. But otherwise, for me, it was really like fun and easy to slide into that. And I knew you had a different experience with it.
Oh no, it's been fine. I have a big problem. They give you your script back with all the drawings the way you ask them to draw it, and then they have little balloons for the dialogue. And then you've already written the script, but now they are like, the balloons are so tiny, and I've written really long dialogue that now I have to fit into these tiny balloons. So if you've ever read a comic book and you're like, why do they just say yow or ouch? That's why.
Yeah, I think that you could ask for
why.
a few more panels, honestly.
Yeah, well, mine's for younger readers than yours.
Oh, true.
So I think that they really are trying to keep it middle grade level. I did think of something that I wanted to ask you quickly. You did a lot of research on The Wizard of Oz when you started writing the sequels.
I just sat down and read all the books and then made
all
up the rest.
And there are how many Wizard of Oz books?
Well, I read the original 19 that are Baum's books, and then there's another 20 that were like but that were written after he died.
And then did you feel when you were writing your sequels that you had to be true to the source material, or did you just throw it all out and start?
I felt like it was a toolbox. Like I wanted to stay true to certain things about the characters, and then have that be the root of their changes. So Dorothy becomes evil in my version, but it came from this place of wanting, when she went back to Kansas, she wants magic and she wants agency and she wants her friends back, so she gets a little petulant, and by petulant I mean evil. And when she returns to Oz, she becomes the ruler, but also her friends, instead of abandoning her, go on the same journey with her. So the lion who had no courage now has courage, and it's kind of that overcorrection, and now he actually is like living off of other people's fear. The Tin Man is obsessively in love with Dorothy, and
That's so cute.
and the Scarecrow is a mad genius, and he's
that's
a mad
great.
scientist. So I took that gem and made it into something else. But I've always been fascinated with the idea of what happens when people who don't have power get power,
Yeah.
and that was what I was exploring.
That's so great. Unlike me, I was just fascinated by what is underneath the Key West Cemetery, which is, it turns out is the underground. And of course, I was obsessed with whether or not King Arthur is going to come back and save us all, which is in my book, Avalon High. Is it okay if we start taking questions from the audience? I think we might do that. If anyone has any questions, otherwise we'll just keep, oh my gosh, there's a hand up already. Okay, there are no questions that are off limits. You can ask whatever you want. I'll tell you my stupid pen name. I had to take a pen name because I didn't want my grandma to know that I was writing smutty books. And I'll just let you know that she found out anyway.
Did she read them?
She read them and she loved them. She became my biggest fan. She threw a big book party for me and she invited all her friends who are nuns. So it was really embarrassing. And I didn't know that nuns liked smut so much, but they do. And that made me kind of happy. I was like, okay.
I think it's really flattering.
Yeah. Nuns need to have fun too. So if the nuns like it, it's okay. All right, who has a question? Oh.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you. My name is Mia, and I wanted to add to your books about girls a series that I read as a little girl, and I loved it. It was The Little House on the Prairie,
Oh,
the
me
Laura
too.
Ingalls Wilder. But I wanted to ask you, is there a particular personality quality of strength that you found that resonates with little girls and young women? Thank you.
Oh, wow.
I mean, one that I like to put in my books because I think it's really important is empathy, that you really want to show that your character has empathy for others because that is something that sometimes I witness because I do hang out with I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and every once in a while you'll see one of them not exercising empathy. That's where we get the bullying stuff going on. And so I try to show a character who maybe doesn't start out with empathy at the beginning of the story, but learns empathy throughout the way of the story because I just think that's really important. And I think that is actually something that Judy Blume did very particularly well in her books, particularly one that's my favorite one. It's called Blubber. That there's a big bullying incident in the class, and at first the main character is like, she deserves it, which the kid is kind of a jerk anyway, so you're like, maybe she's right. But then ultimately she learns, we got to show compassion for everyone, and I think that that's a really good, important. On the other hand, sometimes the people in these, especially the Hunger Games and stuff, she does have to kill people who deserve it, so you can't have too much empathy.
I like showing that. I don't want to say unlikability is actually like a quality,
Right.
but I like a lack of perfection in my characters because I think that I love that Mia is a reluctant heroine, that she doesn't want to be a princess. I made Amy a character who did not want to be a fighter because I think in real life you normally have to overcome something to get to the place that you want. So showing that vulnerability, I think, is really important.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't have them be perfect because you want your readers to be able to relate to them. And so if they're too perfect, then it's like reading, not to malign another writer's books, but one of the reasons I could never connect to, what were the ones about the twins that were super
Sweet
perfect?
Valley High.
I could not connect to Sweet Valley High because I was like, those girls don't ever really have any problems. They're too attractive.
Kind of like the meaner one better.
You like the mean one? That's hilarious.
Yeah, but
That's a good question. Thank you for that.
I thought she was more interesting.
Yeah. All right. I can't believe I said I didn't like Sweet Valley High.
I was a
Don't
fan.
kill me, Francine Pascal. Who else has a question? Yes.
Hi. We live next to Key West Cemetery. That's just a footnote.
Have you noticed any weird underground rumblings?
No,
No,
actually.
okay.
My question has to do with two topics you've covered, comic books and powerful women.
Yes.
So in the last several years, we've had the emergence, not for the first time, but we've had the emergence of a number of very powerful women in our political scene. Candidates, office holders, pundits. There are a number of people, a number of women who've come out as being very strong and powerful. I'm sitting close to my friend on the opposite side of the political spectrum, so I'm measuring my words not to lead this question. Among those who you have heard, who would be the most compelling women to write a comic book or a graphic novel about based on their real lives? I hope the question's clear.
I think it's pretty clear.
It's
Who
pretty
would,
clear.
who would you?
I'd take on Hillary.
You would do one about Hillary. I was thinking of God, I can never remember her last name. It starts with an O, and it's
Ocasio.
Yeah.
I can't say it. Cortez.
Yeah. Maybe.
I'm gonna say it wrong. But the girl from New York who
Yeah.
I'm gonna say. Can you
Yes.
guys say it?
Thank you.
Yeah. See, I can't
Yeah.
say it.
It would be interesting to see if like Michelle Obama had a secret life that we don't know about. Like I could see her being a secret superhero, kind
I
of
think
like
she might be.
yeah, with a cape that she never lets anyone see.
Right.
I don't know.
Those arms,
What about
like, how did
Angela
she get those
Merkel
arms?
though? I always wonder what's going on with Angela
Oh, I
Merkel.
love that.
Like maybe she's secret, or Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
That would
secret
be-
spy.
that would be very
I don't
cool.
know. There's so many.
If we could give them superpowers. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
They may have superpowers, but we don't know it. So I'm going to go with Angela Merkel because what's up with her? I think she's just hilarious. I may be being influenced by the SNL skit about her that always makes me laugh.
I like that. Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question though.
yeah,
I'm
I like
glad
the
that DC has not assigned me that one.
No, I think that would be really tough.
Gonna point that out that I would be like, maybe have to turn that one down. It's too hard. I think. Did you have a question?
Yes, I did. My name's Deborah. I'm from
Deborah.
Columbus, Ohio. My question was more in line with structuring your books around the matriarchal versus the patriarchal power structures, where male power structures tend to be more hierarchical, more vertical pecking orders and such, and women's tend to be more collaborative, more power sharing, more of like a council, women's circle or whatever. And how does that influence the way you write?
I'm writing a fairy godmother origin story now, and I made it take place in a kingdom where there's no such thing as a kingdom, they're queendoms.
Oh, great.
And so I'm kind of exploring what that looks like, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, and I think, well, at least the Princess Diaries is shown in the books to have, it's a very old school, patriarchal, never had really very many female rulers before, and so the princess is constantly battling against that. And they weren't even they were just a monarchy. They didn't even allow the people to vote until my princess came along. And then, it's a book written for 12-year-olds, so it was very easy, it turned out, for her to just turn it into a monarchy that's also a democracy, much like England. And she was just like, how come you guys never thought of it until I came along? It's fiction. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough because it's fiction. And so it would be much harder if it were actually reality, I think, because we're going up against thousands of years of, I'm not going to say toxic masculinity, but it is masculinity. It's much easier, though, when you make up your own country, as we have both done.
Right, but I do think that there's something to be said for, like, there have been criticisms of Game of Thrones, and the response is normally that, well, it's a patriarchal society. This is like, but it's fantasy. It could be whatever you want it to be, and that's the thing. We get to make our own realities.
Right. That's why we
So-
write fiction and not nonfiction.
So I'd like to see more queendoms.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe that could be our next comic. Oh, hi up there. Question.
Well, hello down there.
Hi.
First, I want to say thank you. I'm a local teacher here, and I really appreciate that you write the novels you do. We are currently working through Dorothy Must Die in both Spanish and English.
Oh, thank you. That makes me so happy.
I don't really know what happens in the Spanish version.
Neither do I.
I'm interested in, do you think that the archetype of the female heroine is held to a higher standard than that of a man?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you comment on that, please?
Well, you go. I don't know. I just think that women in general are held to a different and higher standard than men in general. And I assume I don't know why that is.
I think it's because you have to be both. I mean, in some cases, there's the dichotomy of whether or not you can be a mother and also be a warrior, whether
Yeah.
you can do both jobs. It's the idea of having it all. Can you do all the things? Because you're
Yeah.
expected to still maintain that role of, I think, mother on
Yeah.
top of.
It's so weird. I mean, we can't even take our shirts off in public without getting arrested. I mean, here in Key West you can, but in most of the country, we are held to a completely different standard than men, and
Right.
it's just odd. And part of it is because we are viewed as the weaker sex, and we probably always will be, but people don't want women on the battlefield because we're so delicate. And so that's something, and they just recently wouldn't allow women to swim at the pool in Congress. It was men only.
I did not know that.
And so they just now had to change it because some of them like to swim naked, it turns out. And I'll say who it was. It was Lindsey Graham, and he's all mad.
I don't want that.
I just read that, I was like, what? Oh my gosh. I mean, I understand we all like to swim naked, but it's not at work.
No.
So it's just, but you know what, I feel like we're making progress. It's slowly, but it's getting better. I'm trying to be positive about it. And
I mean, I
but
look
yeah.
at the strides that we've made in our lifetimes and
Yeah.
how much that we've seen. And then even though, and not to get political, there may have been some recent setbacks, I still feel like we're going in the right direction.
And I think a lot of it, at least our bosses at DC, are trying really hard by doing this new superhero line, which has a ton of women. It has women of color. It has books that are geared towards younger readers, specifically trying to get past that whole kind of, no, these are books for boys. No, they're books for everybody, and they're going to be in not just comic book stores, but in libraries and in regular bookstores as well.
Yeah, and I think neither of us imagined writing for comics
No,
when we were
I
growing
never
up.
thought that was
And
a thing.
and we were on a panel the other day where both boys were like, yeah, I wanted to do that, like
We were
from
like-
forever. I'm like, really? Like I didn't even know if a girl could write Archie comics, for God's sake.
Right.
So to be included and invited to the party
it's
is
really great.
so great.
And celebrate it.
Yes.
They take us out for drinks all the time.
It's really lovely.
Hey there. Thank you for speaking of your novels, nonfiction as well. I'm curious, when you sit down, write your novels, what sort of scene are you picturing yourself in? Because from my understanding, educated understanding, people who are authors, you have to have a certain setting, a rhetorical setting for writing a specific novel. So I'm curious of how you are when you write, as well as how you, if you step into the character's role before writing.
Do you mean physically, like where are we doing our writing, and how, like what kind of setting we're in, like at a
Like a
desk or-
description.
For me, when I was writing the Dorothy books, the very first image that came into my head was actually a character and a setting at the same time. So I saw this little goth munchkin in the middle of the yellow brick road, and the yellow brick road's crumbly, and the trees are dying, and it's that was like my first image. And then I had the idea of like maybe all the magic is like draining out of Oz. And the munchkin is tattooed because and with the story of Oz on her body, and like it kind of came from character, but also from the idea. And I just think you have to play with your setting, basically. I don't know. What do you see your images? I mean, you're pretty visual. You started out in art too.
Yeah, I think, well, so I'm just writing a book now that's going to be, it's about the Hurricane Irma that came through Key West. And so I picture all of that and what the results of the hurricane was, and try to remember that. I'm changing the name of the hurricane so that the hurricane doesn't sue me. But yeah, I think it's a very visual. You try to get yourself back into that mode, and I kept notes during that time, so I read through those and just try to put yourself in that position and think about the characters that I've created that I'm going to put in that hurricane and how mad they're going to be at me for doing that because they have to go through it again. But I also will read then a lot of books about, unfortunately, like hurricanes and other people's experiences. And this book specifically is about animal rescue during that time. So I'm reading a lot of animal rescue stuff. And so, yeah, you really got to saturate yourself with the research for getting into the new book. And when I wrote like the King Arthur book, it was the same thing. I read so many dissertations on King Arthur because I kind of thought it was real, like it was a true story, but they're still out on that. I don't know.
And Aquaman's based on the Arthur legend too.
Oh, yeah, we found that out from Margaret Atwood.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's weird. Everything is kind of related to everything else, it turns out, in case you didn't know. Anybody else have a question? Oh, my God, there's so many questions down here, too, so we're going in the back right now.
Hi, my name's Jocelyn. I'm a local high school student, and my question is, in a country where men dominate almost every entertainment industry, what advice would you give young female writers to push through obstacles pertaining to gender stipulations?
It's a tough one. I mean, for me, I lucked out in a way that I picked soap operas, which was a very female-driven industry, and now in young adult, which is also very female-driven. But I think you have to make connections and network and do all this. I mean, don't you think it's always?
Yeah, I actually don't think it's as male-oriented as it seems. I think there are a lot of men at the top, but the people who will actually probably be reading your stuff are going to be women, high-powered women. Everybody that I worked with on the Princess Diaries is a woman. The people who produced it, I mean, it was Whitney Houston, believe it or not, and her entire production staff were all women. I think that you're going to be surprised to find that the people that you're hearing about who are being arrested right now are men, but the people who are working below them are all women. It makes you wonder what was going on, but
There's a lot of women
everyone that I
in
have worked with,
development, yeah.
because everybody's like, what's your Me Too story? And I'm like, I don't have one because I never even met a guy in my entire publishing career, because there's none that I even know of. So, yeah, I mean, I've always worked with women.
Right,
And they're very supportive, but my advice to you would be to write. Are you a writer? Yes? I can't hear you. Oh, not yet? What are you doing? Get to work. Come on. Start writing. Just write and write and write. Write as much as you can, and but do your homework first. 'Cause that's more important. You want to get your homework done.
Yes.
Don't just sit around and write like Archie comic fan fiction like she did.
I
No,
I
I'm
really am
kidding.
a
She didn't
huge
do
fan
that.
of Riverdale. No.
Yeah, Riverdale, that's what it is.
Yeah, but you have to have something. You
have to have something to show 'em.
to show. I think there was a story, and this is going to be a boy's story. I think it's Brian Glazer wanted to be a producer and kept telling everyone he wanted to be a producer. And he sat down with, I want to say it's Steven Spielberg, or someone sat down with him and said, well, but where's your piece of paper? What's the idea? Like, you can't, what are you producing?
Yeah.
So you have to make the thing to sell with.
Yeah, that's all. You'll be fine. I would not worry. It's very worrying because it's in the media a lot, but I think there's some house cleaning going on. It's going to be.
There is.
Going to be fine.
Yeah, and there's a lot of female gatekeepers that you can
Yeah.
knock on those doors.
Yeah. But get that thing written. Look at this little angel right here. It's got a question.
Hi, I'm Sia, and I'm a local middle school student.
Hi, Sia.
I love the name.
I know.
Are you coming out with a new Princess Diaries book anytime soon?
I can't tell you. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. Not going to spill the beans, but we'll find out. But thanks for reading, and thanks for coming here today. What school do you go to? Oh, all right, great. Montessori. You got Montessori in the house. Okay. Who else? Anybody? Oh my gosh, so many questions. Wow. You did a good job with generating. You guys are asking really hard questions too.
Yes.
My God.
Hi. I want to, first of all, thank you for helping provide great role models for kids who are reading. I also think boys need to read books with strong female characters.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
should have said that.
Wow.
Yes.
So-
Yes, they do.
What are you doing? I guess the comic books might
Yeah.
lead us there, but what kinds of efforts are you and others making to try to get boys reading books that have strong female as well as strong male? And characters and also male characters that can show their emotions.
Right.
I have to say that I actually have a lot of male readers for Dorothy Must Die, and I think honestly, it's a book cover makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Because my cover it's a black cover with a drawing on it, and I think that draws more boys in than the picture of the pretty girl in a dress.
Pink cover doesn't really.
Yeah, and
I
I
mean,
think
it's just sad because it's a gender stereotype, but.
No, but and they've done studies about adult books in the same way, that if a cover looks like a female cover, then men won't pick it up. So I think that actually packaging and marketing make a big difference to reach those boys, and teachers and librarians directing kids to, well, you're going to like this book. It's not a girl book. It's an everyone book. And I think that it starts at that level.
Yeah, and I think parent role modeling is really important too. If the kid sees their parent reading something that shows the kid, okay, reading is cool, I should do it too. And it really, really helps. I grew up in a household where both my parents read all the time, read all sorts of different stuff, and so the kids in that house read. So I think that it is a problem. I mean, definitely boys don't read as much as girls, and it's something that we're trying to work on, especially with the new DC Comics.
Yes.
They kind of have gender neutral covers, even though we, of course, have been sitting here going, our books are for girls. But I mean, hers has Aquaman in it, so there is a strong male who's hanging out with the female. Mine has girls and boys, although it is about a girl for the most part. Her dad is also there a lot, and he's a police detective who is not too happy about what's going on in his house. But so yeah, they're really conscious of that and trying to cater to both sexes.
Yes.
So we know it's a problem. Boys and girls, always fighting.
But this is a related question. I was wondering if you're being pressured from the industry to broaden young women's reading to men, that is to start selling it outside the category of female literature.
We are not sold as female literature. We're sold as young adult.
Yeah,
Things
no,
are not
there's no pressure.
traditional.
If anything, we're probably pressuring them because we want to sell more books.
Right.
So sometimes we will, I know that I will sometimes get a cover that I feel is too feminine, and I'll say to the publisher, hey, what about trying something that's not pink for a change? Which is a shame, you know, that pink now has this stereotype that it's only for girls, because it used to be just a neutral color back in Victorian times, but whatever. And they'll go, oh, yeah, you're right, okay. So it's just the publishers are so set in their ways sometimes. I hope nobody hears a publisher.
No, and I think I had a Snow Queen book called Stealing Snow, and the cover was a lot more feminine, and then we repackaged it for the paperback, and I think the cover, even though there's a girl on the cover, the cover's black, I think it's much more appealing for both audiences, and I hate to say that we're that gendered, but I do think it makes a difference, because if you're the kid, if you're the little boy on the playground, you want to be holding a book that looks cool to you.
Yeah, I mean, that sometimes will happen, that kids will be holding a book and people will make fun of them. And so we're the ones who hear those stories because we're going out and meeting the readers, and the publishers are in their New York castles, and they don't hear this stuff. So we have to go back and tell them. So if you have any stories, let us know. We'll convey them. Yes.
We have time for about one or two more.
Okay, well, pick some good people. Let's be curious to see who he's going to pick now.
I'm volunteering to be a good person. Good people, right. This doesn't have to do so much with what you've been talking about, but the biographical novel. I just ordered, because it's on back order, the new book about Frederick Douglass.
Okay.
And obviously a lot of books have been written about Frederick Douglass. I guess my question has to do with, as a novelist, and as a biographer, you're looking for truth. You're looking to get to what really happened at that time in that situation. At what point, as a writer, can you feel comfortable? Because there have been so many other things done. At what point do you feel comfortable that you've got the truth enough to write it as an authority?
Wow.
I mean, I haven't written nonfiction in a very long time. But I think for me, there's a moment when you're writing a character and it clicks for you and you feel.
What
are you asking about?
No,
nonfiction?
I think what you're talking about nonfiction, and I think you need 3 sources that all say the same thing. I personally want 3. If you can find it once, you can't trust it. If you find it twice, probably true. If you find it 3 times, to me, then it's true. And they're 3 reliable sources, not just Wikipedia, because I personally know how a lot of people go into Wikipedia and change stuff. So I think if it's sourced 3 times, then you can trust it. And so that, if you feel confident in the author. We actually have a great guy here, Eric Schanauer, who's doing a book on the Age of Bronze, he showed how many sources he goes to make sure that his drawings are correct. And he had like 5 or 6 sources for each thing. But he still, when he is showing his book around, will have scholars come up and tell him he got stuff wrong. So, I mean, it's how many sources does he have to go to? And also, this is stuff that the Trojan War was a long time ago. So I doubt that there are people, and there's no one alive who can tell him that he's wrong. But he's still trying. So it's difficult. But for me, at least 3 sources, and that's what I try to do. I don't know. But one last question. Oh, hi. Are you from Montessori too?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your name?
I'm Skylar.
Hi, Skylar.
Oh, I love that name too.
Was it hard for you guys to write about like a female protagonist instead of like, yeah?
Was it hard? No, because we're girls.
Yeah,
we were
that
just
part-
writing
that
about
part was the
ourselves
easy part.
mostly.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
was-
I've written from. Have you ever done anything?
I'm
from a
going
male
to tell you guys a
perspective?
secret. I haven't told anybody this. I wrote a book from a male point of view just like last year, and it got rejected because they told me it was not Meg Cabot enough. My name is Meg Cabot, and I was like, but I wrote this, so how could it not be me enough? And they're like, well, but it's from a guy's point of view, and you've never done that before, and no one's going to understand it. Because, can you believe
crazy.
that? I know.
I think you should have done a pen name.
Well, yeah. So now I'm like, I'm just going to go call myself like Brutus Kelvin or something and try to publish it. But so I think for me at least, apparently it's harder to write under a guy's point of view.
When I did soaps, I got derayed from everyone's
Oh,
point of
yeah,
view,
that's
including
right.
the old couple in the hot tub. So I feel pretty comfortable writing in other voices, but being inside, when you're writing a book, you're in someone's head.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're even more comfortable being a girl.
Yeah. So it's fun. You guys have just been great. Thank you so much for coming out here and
So
listening
much
to
fun.
us. Yeah.